The Endeavour screamed toward the two remaining Thekmor vessels at maximum burn, its chaos field blazing like a psychotic star against the dark of space. Every system on the ship was redlined, every crew member pushed beyond their biological limits, and somehow, impossibly, it was working. Distance to target, 30,000 kilometers and closing. Navigation Officer Park announced, her voice cracking with exhaustion but steady with determination. Their defensive systems are trying to target us, but they can't get a lock. In the medical bay, Sarah was fighting to stay conscious while monitoring the crew's vital signs. Half her readouts looked like abstract art, with biorhythms that defied every principle of stable physiology. But those same chaotic patterns were creating an interference field that made the Endeavour effectively invisible to Thekmor targeting systems. Dr. Chen, HFY called out, his own massive frame struggling against the G-forces of their acceleration. The lead vessel is charging what appears to be a quantum destabilizer. If they fire that weapon, let them try, Sarah gasped, watching as crewman Thompson's heart rate hit 200 beats per minute and somehow kept climbing. At this point, our biology is so screwed up that quantum physics probably can't figure out what to do with us either. She was only half joking. The chaos field generators were amplifying human stress responses to levels that shouldn't have been survivable. But somehow, the crew was not only surviving, but becoming more unpredictable by the second. Thompson wasn't just experiencing cardiac stress. His heart was beating in patterns that seemed to defy basic math. Park's neural activity was spiking in sequences that looked like they were trying to spell out poetry in brainwaves. 15,000 kilometers, Rodriguez reported from Tactical. Captain, they're attempting to communicate again. Put them through, Williams ordered. His own voice strained as his body fought against acceleration forces that should have liquefied his internal organs. The Thekmor transmission came through filled with static and distortion, their normally precise communication systems apparently struggling to process the signal through the chaos field. Human vessel, your approach vector is suicidal. You cannot survive collision with our defensive barriers. Watch us, Williams replied simply. Your species exhibits behavior patterns that violate strategic logic, the alien voice continued, and for the first time there was something that might have been desperation in its mechanical tone. We do not understand how you maintain unit cohesion while experiencing such extreme biological stress. Your crew should be dead or incapacitated. We're human, Captain Williams replied. We specialize in doing things that should kill us. In engineering, Chief Kowalski was performing miracles with systems that were running at a 150% of safe capacity. The chaos field generators were drawing so much power that they were literally burning themselves out. But they were also feeding off the crew's biological chaos to generate energy in ways that violated several laws of thermodynamics. Captain, he called over the roar of overloaded systems. The generators are actually getting stronger as they burn out. It's like the more broken they get, the more chaotic energy they produce. That's the most human thing I've ever heard, Williams replied. How much longer can we maintain this? Unknown. The readings don't make sense anymore. We're running on pure spite and adrenaline at this point. 10,000 kilometers from the lead Thekmor vessel, something extraordinary happened. The quantum destabilizer fired, sending a beam of pure annihilation toward the approaching human ship. The weapon was designed to unmake matter at the subatomic level, to reduce any target to its component particles in microseconds. Instead, it struck the chaos field and immediately began to feed back into itself. The quantum beam couldn't maintain coherence against the biological chaos emanating from 37 humans who were too stubborn to die, too scared to think clearly and too determined to give up. The destabilizer is overloading, HFY reported with amazement. Their own weapon is consuming itself. The massive Thekmor vessel shuddered as its primary weapon system began to tear itself apart from the inside. But Captain Williams wasn't watching the enemy ship anymore. He was watching his own crew, and what he saw filled him with a pride that transcended fear. Navigation Officer Park was flying the ship while her nervous system operated at levels that should have caused immediate seizure, but instead had given her reflexes that bordered on precognitive. Lieutenant Rodriguez was managing tactical systems while experiencing stress responses that had turned his awareness into something approaching supernatural perception. Throughout the ship, humans were performing at levels that redefined what their species was capable of. 5,000 kilometers, Park announced. Captain, I'm detecting massive structural failures in both enemy vessels. Their control systems can't handle the feedback from our chaos field. Sarah forced herself to check the medical displays one more time. What she saw there made her laugh despite everything, or perhaps because of everything. The crew's vital signs had moved so far beyond normal human parameters that they were essentially becoming something new. Not superhuman exactly, but definitely more than baseline human. "Captain," she called to the bridge, her voice surprisingly steady despite her body operating in full biological chaos mode. "I think we're evolving in real time. The stress is triggering adaptive responses I've never seen before." "Evolving into what?" Williams asked. "Something the Thekmor have never encountered," HFY answered. "Something that exists in a state of controlled chaos. Something that cannot be predicted, categorized, or conquered." 2,000 kilometers. The lead Thekmor vessel was firing everything it had, but every weapon was either reflecting back or failing to achieve target lock. The second vessel was actually retreating, its systems apparently unable to process what they were witnessing. 1,000 kilometers. The Endeavor's hull was beginning to glow from atmospheric friction as they entered the outer edge of the Thekmor ship's defensive field. Structural integrity warnings were screaming, but the ship held together through sheer human engineering stubbornness. 500 kilometers. The Thekmor vessel was trying to turn away, but its control systems were still reeling from feedback chaos. The massive ship was as helpless as a beached whale. "All hands," Captain Williams announced over the ship's intercom. "Brace for impact. And remember, we're about to do something that's never been done before. Let's make sure we do it right." At exactly 100 kilometers from impact, Dr. Sarah Chen made a decision that would echo through galactic history. Instead of bracing for collision, she maximized the chaos field generators one final time, pushing them so far beyond safe parameters that they essentially became biological weapons of mass confusion. The field that erupted from the Endeavor in that moment was pure, concentrated human chaos, every fear, every hope, every stubborn refusal to accept defeat that had ever driven a human to attempt the impossible. It washed over the Thekmor vessel like a tsunami of biological anarchy. The alien ship's crystalline structure didn't just shudder, it began to sing, harmonizing with human chaos in ways that created new frequencies of possibility. And in that moment of perfect, impossible contact between order and chaos, something unprecedented happened. The Thekmor vessel surrendered. The first Thekmor weapon struck the Endeavor exactly 18 minutes after the alien fleet entered firing range. What should have been a ship-killing energy drain instead resulted in the most spectacular system overload anyone had ever witnessed. "Chaos field generators are holding," Chief Kowalski reported from engineering, his voice mixing excitement and disbelief. "Their drain beam hit us and just bounced off. No, wait, it's doing something else entirely." On the bridge, Captain Williams watched the tactical display with growing amazement. The Thekmor energy weapon had indeed struck their ship, but instead of draining their power systems, it was feeding back chaotic energy patterns into the attacking vessel. The alien ship's crystalline structure was actually flickering as its own weapon tried to process the contradictory data being reflected back at it. "Dr. Chen, report," Williams called to the medical bay. Sarah's voice came back strained but triumphant. "The chaos field is working better than we hoped. The crew's stress responses are off the charts, but that's exactly what we need. Every time their weapons try to lock onto our life signs, our biology changes faster than they can adapt." In the medical bay, Sarah was monitoring readings that defied every principle of stable physiology. Heart rates that fluctuated by 50 beats per minute from second to second, brain activity that spiked and dropped in patterns that looked like abstract art, and stress hormone levels that should have been fatal but somehow weren't. SciFi watched the displays with something approaching reverence. "Impossible," he whispered. "Your people are literally adapting in real time to counter their weapons. I have never seen biological systems respond so quickly to external threats. That's humans for you," Sarah said through gritted teeth as she fought to stay conscious while her own biology raged through the amplified chaos field. "We're basically evolution on fast forward. When we're panicked enough." The second Thekmor vessel fired a different type of weapon, something that looked like a concentrated beam of darkness that should have torn through their hull like paper. Instead, the beam struck their chaos field and immediately began to waver and distort. "Their beam weapons can't maintain coherence," reported Lieutenant Rodriguez from the tactical station. "It's like trying to cut water with a laser that keeps changing frequency." But the real surprise came when the third Thekmor ship attempted to use what HFY identified as a conversion beam, a weapon designed to turn the crew into willing servants of the alien empire. The beam struck the Endeavour and was immediately reflected back with interest. "Captain," Navigation Officer Park called out in alarm, "the lead Thekmor vessel is showing signs of system instability." Williams studied the tactical display with growing disbelief. The massive alien ship was flickering between different energy states, its crystalline structure seeming to lose cohesion as chaotic feedback from their conversion beam wreaked havoc with its control systems. "Dr. Chen, what exactly are we broadcasting at them?" Sarah checked her readings and started laughing despite their desperate situation. "Everything." Fear, excitement, adrenaline, confusion, determination, terror, and about 17 different stress hormones all mixed together in patterns that change every few seconds. Basically, we're giving them a concentrated dose of pure human emotion, and it's driving their systems insane, HFY added wonderingly. The Thekmor technology is designed for predictable, ordered biological responses. They have never encountered anything like human psychological chaos. The battle, if it could be called that, continued for another hour. The Thekmor fleet threw everything they had at the small human ship: planet-killing energy weapons, matter conversion beams, quantum disruptors, and weapons that HFY couldn't even identify. Every single attack either failed completely or backfired spectacularly. "This is impossible," came a transmission from the lead Thekmor vessel, the first time they had attempted communication. The voice was cold, mechanical, utterly without emotion. "Your species should not exist. Your biological patterns violate the fundamental principles of organized life." Captain Williams activated the communication array. "This is Captain Williams of the human vessel Endeavour. You picked the wrong species to mess with." "Humans," the Thekmor voice repeated, and there was something that might have been confusion in its tone. "We have no records of this species. Your chaotic biology is disturbing. How do you maintain consciousness with such irregular life patterns?" "Practice," Williams replied dryly. "Also coffee. Lots of coffee." The conversation was interrupted by a massive explosion as one of the Thekmor vessels simply came apart. The chaotic feedback from their own weapons had finally overwhelmed their control systems entirely. "One down," Rodriguez reported. "The other two are pulling back to a safe distance." But Sarah was watching something else on her medical displays. "Captain, we have a problem. The chaos field is taking a toll on the crew. I'm reading system stress indicators across the board. We can't maintain this level of biological chaos much longer." Indeed, several crew members had already collapsed from the strain of having their bodies function at such extreme levels. The human ability to adapt under stress was remarkable, but it wasn't unlimited. "How long can we hold out?" Williams asked. "Maybe another hour at current levels," Sarah replied. "After that, we risk permanent damage to our nervous systems." HFY struggled to his feet, his wounds still healing but his eyes bright with determination. "Then we must take the fight to them before you exhaust yourselves. Captain Williams, I know the weak points of Thekmor vessels. If you can get us close enough—" "You want us to ram a ship 50 times our size?" Williams asked. "I want you to be human," HFY replied. "Do something so unpredictable that their strategic computers cannot process it." Williams looked around the bridge at his crew. They were exhausted. Some were barely conscious, but every face showed the same stubborn determination that had gotten humanity through every impossible situation they had ever faced. "Chief Kowalski, divert all power to engines. Dr. Chen, give me everything you can without killing the crew. All hands prepare for ramming speed." "Sir," Park said quietly, "the probability of survival for a ramming attack is essentially 0. "Exactly," Williams replied with a wild grin. "They'll never see it coming." As the Endeavour turned toward the remaining Thekmor vessels, its chaos field blazing with the combined desperation and determination of 37 humans who refused to accept defeat, Sarah felt a moment of perfect clarity, despite the biological chaos raging through her system. This was humanity at its finest, too stubborn to quit, too chaotic to predict, and absolutely insane enough to try the impossible simply because someone told them it couldn't be done. The Endeavour's bridge buzzed with frantic activity as the crew prepared for what everyone knew was likely a suicide mission. Captain Williams stood at the central command console, studying tactical displays that showed the approaching Thekmor fleet. 3 massive vessels, each dwarfing their survey ship by a factor of 50, were closing fast on their position. Estimated time to contact, 18 hours, reported Navigation Officer Park, her voice steady despite the circumstances. Should I set course for the outer system jump point? Negative, Williams replied. We stick to the plan. How are our modifications coming along? Chief Engineer Kowalski's voice crackled over the comm from the engine room. The chaos field generators are installed and ready for testing. But Captain, I have to tell you, this is the craziest thing I've ever built. We're essentially turning our own life support systems into weapons. The idea had come from HFY himself, after hours of discussion about human biology and Thekmor technology. If the alien weapons couldn't handle chaotic human biorhythms, then perhaps they could amplify that chaos and use it defensively. The engineer and Sarah had suggested they could broadcast their own biological irregularities as an interference field. Down in the medical bay, Sarah was putting the finishing touches on the most ambitious part of their plan. HFY watched with fascination as she prepared a series of modified medical scanners that would monitor the vital signs of every crew member in real time. I still do not understand how this will work, the alien warrior admitted. You are proposing to weaponize your own life force? Not weaponize exactly, Sarah explained, adjusting the scanner array. We're going to amplify our natural biological chaos and broadcast it as a field around the ship. If your people's weapons work by syncing with stable biorhythms, then we'll give them so much conflicting data that they can't lock on to anything. And if it fails? Sarah looked up from her work. Then we'll die like humans, fighting something that should be impossible to fight. Lieutenant Rodriguez entered the medical bay carrying a tablet full of readings. Doc, we've got the crew's baseline vitals recorded, but I'm seeing some concerning patterns. Thompson's blood pressure is through the roof. Park's adrenaline levels are off the charts, and frankly, everyone's stress responses are maxed out. Perfect, Sarah said with a grim smile. Scared, stressed humans are exactly what we need. Fear makes us unpredictable. What she didn't mention was her own growing excitement about the possibilities. Throughout her medical career, she had been frustrated by humanity's biological limitations. Their bodies were fragile, their immune systems were overzealous, and their stress responses often caused more harm than good. But now, for the first time, those same weaknesses might actually be strengths. Dr. Martinez rushed in, carrying the void spike they had recovered. Sarah, you need to see this. We've been analyzing the weapon's energy patterns, and I think we've figured out why it failed to drain you completely. He activated a holographic display showing the weapon's energy signature during Sarah's contact with it. Look at this. The spike tried to establish 17 different harmonic locks on your biofield. Every time it thought it had synchronized with your life force, your stress response changed the frequency. It's like trying to tune into a radio station that keeps changing channels, Rodriguez observed. Exactly. And here's the really interesting part. Martinez continued, manipulating the display. The weapon didn't just fail to drain you, it actually absorbed some of your chaotic patterns. Look at these readings from after you pulled it out. The hologram showed the void spike's energy signature becoming increasingly erratic, before finally stabilizing into dormancy. It's like it gave itself a headache trying to process human biology, Sarah said wonderingly. HFY leaned forward, his 3 eyes studying the data intently. This is unprecedented. In all my observations of Thekmor weapons, I have never seen one shut down from confusion. They are designed to be absolutely adaptive. Not adaptive enough, apparently, Sarah said. The question is, can we scale this up to ship level? Captain Williams's voice came over the ship's intercom. All hands report to battle stations. Long-range sensors are picking up the Thekmor fleet. They'll be in weapons range in 6 hours. As the crew scattered to their positions, Sarah felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that had carried her through countless medical emergencies. But this time, instead of trying to control it, she embraced the chaos. Her heart rate spiked, her hands began to shake slightly, and her mind raced with possibilities and contingencies. Are you well, Dr. Chen? HFY asked, noticing her sudden agitation. I'm terrified, she admitted freely, but that's exactly what we need right now. In the engine room, Chief Kowalski was making final adjustments to their improvised chaos field generators. The devices were essentially sophisticated bioscanners connected to the ship's defensive systems, designed to read the crew's vital signs and amplify their irregularities into a ship-wide electromagnetic field. This is either brilliant or insane, he muttered to himself as he calibrated the output frequencies. Probably both. The engineering team had worked around the clock to integrate human medical technology with their ship's systems. It was a combination that had never been attempted before, and shouldn't have been possible with their limited resources. But humans had a long history of making impossible things work through sheer stubborn determination. On the bridge, the crew watched their approaching doom with a mixture of fear and determination. The Thekmor ships were massive crystalline structures that seemed to bend light around them, their alien geometries hurting to look at directly. Energy readings showed weapons that could crack planets and shields that had never been breached. "All sections report ready," announced Park from her station. "Chaos field generators are online and responding to crew biometrics." Captain Williams nodded grimly. "Dr. Chen, are your people ready down there?" Sarah's voice came back steady despite the chaos she was feeling internally. "Medical systems are go. We're reading 37 crew members, all showing elevated stress responses and maximum biological chaos. If this works, it's going to be one hell of a ride." "And if it doesn't work?" Williams asked. "Then at least we'll go down as the first humans to die fighting impossible odds," Sarah replied. "Which feels pretty appropriate, honestly." HFY's voice joined the conversation from the medical bay. "Captain Williams, I want you to know that regardless of the outcome, what your species has attempted today will be remembered. You face a force that has conquered 1,000 worlds, and you do so without fear." "Oh, we're terrified," Williams corrected. "We're just not letting that stop us." As the Thekmor fleet entered weapons range, the Endeavor powered up systems that had never been used in combat, crewed by a species that refused to accept the impossible as final. The human survey ship Endeavor had transformed into a makeshift medical facility within hours. Captain Williams had been skeptical about Dr. Chen's decision to remain on the surface, but the potential for first contact with a friendly alien species outweighed the risks in his mind. Besides, as he told his crew, humanity didn't run from the unknown. In the ship's converted cargo bay, Sarah had established a proper medical suite using the advanced equipment they carried for xenobiological research. HFY lay on a reinforced examination table, his massive frame barely fitting even with the adjustments they had made. His wounds were healing at a remarkable rate, but Sarah continued monitoring his vital signs with fascination. "Your cellular regeneration is incredible," she observed, watching as the biofoam patches she had applied began to merge with his natural tissue. "How long do your people typically live?" "A standard lifespan for my species is approximately 40 of your solar cycles," HFY replied, his voice stronger now that he was properly stabilized. "Though few sentinels reach that age. We are bred for war against the Thekmor." Lieutenant Rodriguez looked up from where he was analyzing the void spike with the ship's science team. "Bred for war? Are you saying your entire civilization is military?" HFY's 3 eyes dimmed with what Sarah was beginning to recognize as sadness. "My civilization was much more than military, human Rodriguez. We were artists, scientists, philosophers, explorers. The Kethmori Empire once spanned 17 star systems and encompassed dozens of worlds filled with beauty and knowledge." "Was?" Sarah prompted gently. "The Thekmor came to our home system 8 cycles ago," HFY continued, his voice taking on the cadence of someone telling a story they had repeated many times. "They offered us a choice: serve as shock troops in their expansion army or face complete annihilation. Our leaders chose to fight." He paused, and Sarah could see the pain in his expression wasn't entirely physical. "We were unprepared for their weapons. The void spikes were just one tool in their arsenal. They had ships that could drain the life from entire planets, weapons that turned our own life force against us, and worst of all, they could corrupt our people, turning them into willing servants." Captain Williams, who had been listening from the medical bay's entrance, stepped forward. "How many of your people survived?" "I am the last," HFY said simply. "The last free Kethmori in the galaxy. The others either died fighting or were taken by the Thekmor to serve in their armies. I have spent the last 3 cycles moving from system to system, staying ahead of their hunter-killers, hoping to find someone who could resist their weapons." The implications hung heavy in the air. Sarah felt a chill as she realized what they were dealing with. "How many species have they conquered?" "Hundreds," HFY replied. "Perhaps thousands. They have been expanding for millennia, and no one has ever successfully resisted them. Until today." Dr. Martinez, the ship's xenobiologist, looked up from his analysis of HFY's blood samples. The energy readings we're getting from his cellular structure are off the charts. It's like every cell in his body is a miniature power plant. How do the Thekmor drain that kind of life force? They use quantum entanglement to create a resonance between their weapons and a target's bioelectric field, HFY explained. Once the connection is established, they can drain life energy across any distance. It is why the void spike was so deadly. It creates a permanent link between the weapon and its target. Sarah frowned. But it didn't work on me, why? That is what puzzles me, HFY admitted. I have studied Thekmor technology for cycles trying to find a weakness. Their weapons are designed to exploit the natural harmony of biological systems. They sync with the target's life rhythm and gradually overtune it until cellular collapse occurs. Rodriguez whistled low. That's diabolical. They weaponize the fact that living things have predictable patterns. Exactly. But human patterns? HFY tilted his head, studying Sarah with renewed interest. When I observed your life signs during contact with the spike, they were chaotic beyond measure. Your heart rate fluctuated wildly. Your brain activity spiked in random patterns, and your biochemistry shifted so rapidly that the weapon could not establish a stable lock. Captain Williams crossed his arms. So you're saying we're too crazy for their weapons to work properly? In crude terms, yes, HFY replied. But it is more than that. Your species appears to have evolved with what can only be called controlled chaos. Most intelligent life develops stable, efficient biological systems. Humans seem to have developed adaptable, unpredictable ones. Sarah laughed despite the gravity of the situation. We've always known we were weird. Our immune systems attack harmless substances while ignoring actual threats. Our stress responses can either save our lives or kill us. And our brains are basically controlled chaos generators. Most of our medical training involves managing the fact that human bodies are barely functional messes. Your barely functional messes may be the galaxy's salvation, HFY said seriously. The Thekmor have never encountered a species they could not predict and counter. You represent something entirely new. Dr. Martinez looked troubled, but that means they'll be particularly interested in studying us. If they figure out how to counter our chaotic biology, then they will have eliminated the only threat they have encountered in 1,000 cycles, HFY finished. This is why I tried to warn you away from the spike. If the Thekmor capture humans and learn to replicate your resistance, they will become truly unstoppable. The medical bay fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity had barely begun to explore their local galactic neighborhood, and they had already painted a target on their backs simply by being themselves. Captain Williams was the first to speak. How long before their fleet arrives? My scouts detected their approach 6 hours ago, HFY replied. They will be here within the day. Sarah looked around at her crewmates, seeing her own determination reflected in their faces. Then we better figure out how to help each other survive what's coming. Because something tells me running isn't going to be an option. HFY's eyes widened. You intend to fight them? With one small vessel against a Thekmor battle fleet? We intend to be human, Sarah replied firmly. And apparently that's something they've never dealt with before. Purple blood sprayed across Sarah's visor as she yanked the void spike free, but her hands never stopped moving. Years of emergency medicine had trained her to work through chaos, and this was just another trauma case, regardless of how many arms her patient had. Rodriguez, get over here now, she barked into her comm while simultaneously activating her suit's emergency medical protocols. The battlefield medkit materialized from her suit's storage compartment, its contents adapting to her scanner's readings of the alien physiology. HFY's breathing had become ragged gasps, and his 3 eyes were beginning to lose focus. Sarah's scanner showed massive internal bleeding and what appeared to be organ damage to at least 3 vital systems. In a human, these injuries would be fatal within minutes, even in a fully equipped hospital. But HFY wasn't human. Your anatomy is incredible, Sarah muttered as she worked, her hands guided by the real-time scanner readings that revealed the alien's internal structure. You have redundant circulatory systems, backup organs, and your cellular regeneration rate is off the charts. Lieutenant Rodriguez arrived at her side, his weapon drawn but pointing away from the patient. Doc, my readings show that weapon you pulled out is still active. The energy signature is getting stronger. Sarah glanced at the void spike, which lay several feet away where she had thrown it. The weapon was indeed pulsing more rapidly now, its red glow becoming almost blinding, but her attention was fixed on saving HFY's life. Your species, the alien whispered, his voice barely audible through the translator. How do you resist the spike's hunger? I have seen it drain the life from a dozen warriors in moments. Honestly, I have no idea, Sarah admitted as she applied a biofoam seal to the largest wound. But humans have a talent for being too stubborn to die when we're not supposed to. Maybe that's all it was. What she didn't tell him was what her suit's internal sensors had detected during those crucial seconds when she had grabbed the weapon. Her life signs had indeed been affected, but instead of the steady drain that should have killed her, the readings had fluctuated wildly. Her heart rate had spiked to dangerous levels. Her neural activity had increased by 300%, and her adrenaline had reached concentrations that should have been toxic. It was as if her body's fight-or-flight response had kicked into overdrive, flooding her system with so much biochemical chaos that the void spike couldn't get a stable lock on her life force. The weapon had been designed to drain beings with steady, predictable life signs, not the controlled insanity that was human physiology under extreme stress. The bleeding is slowing, she reported, more to herself than to anyone else. Your regenerative systems are starting to compensate for the trauma. I've never seen anything like it. HFY's eyes focused on her with renewed clarity. You speak of regeneration as though it is remarkable. Do your people not heal quickly? Sarah laughed, the sound slightly hysterical. We're probably the most fragile species in the galaxy. We break bones falling downstairs, we die from tiny infections, and our own immune systems try to kill us half the time. But we keep going anyway. Fragile? HFY seemed genuinely confused. But you touched the void spike and survived. You show no fear in the face of unknown dangers. How can you call your species fragile? Because we are, Sarah replied, checking the readouts from the biofoam patches. We're soft, we're slow, we have no natural weapons, and we barely live a century if we're lucky. But maybe that's exactly why we don't give up. When you know you're breakable, every day you don't break feels like a victory. Lieutenant Rodriguez was monitoring the void spike with increasing concern. Doc, whatever that thing is, it's drawing power from somewhere. My instruments are picking up some kind of quantum resonance. I think it's trying to establish a connection with its origin point. Sarah's blood ran cold. You mean it's calling for backup? Before Rodriguez could answer, HFY struggled to sit up, his forearms working to support his massive frame. The spike is a hunter-seeker weapon. Once it tastes blood, it sends coordinates to the Thekmor fleet. They will come to investigate its failure to complete the kill. How long do we have? Sarah asked, even as she continued treating his wounds. With your people's vessels? Perhaps half a solar cycle if you flee immediately, HFY replied. But they will follow. The Thekmor do not tolerate resistance to their weapons. They will want to study how you survived contact with their technology. Sarah looked at the alien warrior, then at the pulsing weapon, then back at her patient. The smart thing to do would be to evacuate immediately, to get as far away from this planet as possible, and hope that humanity's first contact with a hostile alien species wouldn't result in immediate war. But as she watched HFY struggle to his feet, purple blood still seeping from partially healed wounds, she felt that familiar stubborn streak that had gotten her through medical school, through her residency, and through countless impossible cases. Rodriguez signaled the ship. Tell them we're staying. Ma'am? The lieutenant's voice cracked with disbelief. You heard our new friend here. The Thekmor are coming whether we run or not. At least if we stay, we can learn more about what we're up against. And maybe, she looked at HFY, we can find out if human medical techniques work on other species. HFY stared at her with all three eyes. You would risk your lives to continue treating my wounds? Even knowing that the Thekmor fleet will arrive? That's exactly what I'm saying, Sarah replied firmly. Besides, you said it yourself. They want to study how I survived touching their weapon. Well, I'd like to know that myself, and I have a feeling that understanding might be the key to humanity's survival. As if responding to her words, the void spike pulsed one final time before its glow began to fade. But Sarah wasn't watching the weapon anymore. She was focused on her patient, whose three eyes now held something that looked remarkably like hope. Your species, HFY said slowly, may be the first to pose a genuine threat to the Thekmor in 1,000 cycles. Not because you are strong, but because you are impossible to predict. Welcome to humanity, Sarah replied with a grim smile. Population stubborn. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler 442b, the galaxy was a very different place. The Endeavour sat in orbital dock around New Geneva Station, undergoing repairs that were taking longer than expected primarily because the engineering teams kept discovering systems that shouldn't have been able to function, but somehow worked better than ever. Dr. Sarah Chen walked through the station's medical wing, reviewing reports that still made her shake her head in disbelief. The crew of the Endeavour had not only survived their biological chaos experiment, they had emerged from it changed in ways that were only now becoming apparent. The neuroplasticity readings are still off the charts, Dr. Martinez reported as they passed his laboratory. Navigation Officer Park can now calculate hyperspace jumps in her head with accuracy that rivals our best computers. Lieutenant Rodriguez shows reaction times that are literally superhuman. And Chief Kowalski? Well, he's been inventing things that our physicists insist shouldn't work. Sarah nodded, having seen similar changes in herself. Her medical diagnostic abilities had evolved to the point where she could assess a patient's condition with near-perfect accuracy just by observation. It was as if the chaos field experience had unlocked latent potential in human neurology. "Any word from the Techmore?" she asked. "That's the really interesting part," Martinez replied, pulling up a holographic display. "They're not just surrendering, they're asking for help. Apparently our chaos field didn't just disrupt their weapons, it broke something fundamental in their hive mind consciousness. For the first time in millennia, individual Techmore are thinking for themselves." The implications were staggering. The Techmore Empire, which had conquered hundreds of species through absolute unity of purpose, was fragmenting as individual consciousness emerged among their people. Some were horrified by what their collective had done and were actively working to free enslaved species. Others were embracing the chaos and developing what could only be called personalities. Sarah made her way to the station's diplomatic section, where an even more remarkable sight awaited her. HFY stood before a gathered assembly of representatives from dozens of formerly enslaved species, his forearms gesturing as he spoke about the liberation of his people's homeworld. "The humans didn't just defeat the Techmore," he was saying to the assembly. "They gave us something we thought was lost forever, hope. But more than that, they showed us that chaos isn't something to be feared, it's something to be embraced." The last sentinel of the Torn Moons was no longer the last of anything. Keith Morey survivors had emerged from hiding throughout the galaxy, and their homeworld was being rebuilt. But they weren't trying to recreate their old empire. Instead, they were building something new, something that incorporated the lessons they had learned from humanity. Sarah entered the assembly hall just as Captain Williams was addressing the gathered representatives. "The Terran Federation isn't interested in conquest or empire," he was saying. "We're interested in partnership. The galaxy is big enough for everyone, but it's also dangerous enough that we all need to work together." The response from the assembly was overwhelmingly positive. Species that had been enslaved for centuries were eager to work with the humans who had liberated them. But more importantly, they were eager to learn from human adaptability and resilience. After the session, Sarah found herself walking with HFY through the station's observation deck, looking out at the busy space lanes filled with ships from dozens of different species. "Do you ever regret pulling that arrow out of me?" the alien warrior asked with what she had learned to recognize as his version of humor. "Never," Sarah replied firmly. "That was the most important medical procedure of my career, possibly of anyone's career." "The Techmore are calling it the Great Chaos," HFY observed. "They say it was the moment when the galaxy learned that order without flexibility leads to stagnation, and that chaos without purpose leads to destruction. But chaos with purpose, that creates possibility." Sarah nodded, watching a Techmore vessel dock at the station. The ship's formerly perfect crystalline structure now showed signs of modification, organic curves that spoke of individual creativity rather than collective uniformity. "Are they adapting well to individual consciousness?" "Better than anyone expected," HFY replied. "It turns out that when you free a hive mind, you don't just get individuals. You get individuals with the accumulated knowledge and experience of an entire civilization. Some of them are becoming quite human in their thinking." Indeed, many of the former Techmore were displaying traits that were distinctly human-like: curiosity, stubbornness, creativity, and a tendency to attempt impossible things just to see if they could be done. The species that had once been the galaxy's greatest threat was rapidly becoming one of its most innovative forces. "What about Earth?" HFY asked. "Have your people decided how to respond to their new status as galactic liberators?" Sarah laughed. "About the way you'd expect. Half of them are excited about exploring the galaxy and meeting new species. The other half are convinced that we're going to accidentally start another war by being too friendly. And a small but vocal minority is insisting that the whole thing is too good to be true and we should prepare for invasion." "Very human responses," HFY observed approvingly. "The best part is that all three groups are probably right," Sarah continued. "We'll explore the galaxy enthusiastically. We'll probably cause at least a few diplomatic incidents through cultural misunderstandings, and we should definitely be prepared for threats we haven't imagined yet." A chime sounded through the station, announcing the arrival of another ship. This one was from Earth, the first official diplomatic vessel sent by the newly formed Terran Federation. Sarah could see Captain Williams straightening his uniform as he prepared to meet the delegation from home. "Nervous?" she asked him as he passed by. "Terrified," Williams admitted. "But that seems to work out well for us." As Sarah watched the Earth ship dock, she reflected on how much had changed since that moment when she had reached for an alien weapon and refused to let fear stop her from trying to save a life. The galaxy was no longer dominated by a single overwhelming threat. Instead, it was becoming a place where diversity and chaos were seen as strengths rather than weaknesses. The Kethmori were rebuilding their civilization with human help. The former Thickmore were discovering individual creativity. Dozens of liberated species were forming new alliances and exploring technologies that combined the best of their different approaches to science and engineering. And at the center of it all were humans, stubborn, chaotic, adaptable humans who had looked at an impossible situation and decided to make it possible through sheer bloody-minded determination. Sarah's communicator chimed with a message from the medical bay. Another alien species had requested human medical assistance, intrigued by reports of human adaptive healing techniques. She smiled, knowing that each new partnership would likely result in discoveries that neither species could have made alone. As she headed back to work, she passed a group of young humans and aliens working together on some kind of engineering project. Their laughter echoed through the station corridor, mixing human joy with alien harmonics to create something entirely new. The arrow had been pulled out, the wound had healed, and the galaxy would never be the same. In the end, that was the most human thing of all, taking something that should have been an ending and turning it into a beginning.